We're in a series called Refill. And there's a reason that I've called it this series because I truly believe that there is a need for us to be refilled. A lot of us, our cup is empty. I mean, it is just empty. We've been sucking on melted ice for way too long, okay? And what we are needing is we're needing a revival, a personal revival, where God will just enter into our lives in a big way. And where He will refill us and do His work in our life. If you were here the first week when we first started this whole thing, that is where we started, was, man, we have a need for a revival. And I don't know if you've even realized it or not. Maybe you couldn't put your finger on it. Maybe you're just like, is this what the Christian life is all about? That we just kind of live in our existence and we go through the motions and that's all there is? And the answer is no, that's not all there is. The answer is you need to have a revival. You need to be refilled. And so that's where we started, was that revival is very much needed. Last week, we learned, though, that revival begins with having a right view of God and viewing God rightly. And we looked last week at His holiness. Remember that? Where we studied all about how holy and how far above God is compared to us. And if we truly understand that God is so far above us and that He is holy and that His ways are far above our ways, and that might cause us, that will cause us to want to turn to Him and to seek Him to fill us up. And that leads us right into this morning's message. The title of this morning's message is View Sin Rightly. Because when we're faced with God's holiness, when we truly view God rightly and we have a proper understanding of who He is and where He's at in regards to us, we can't help but view sin rightly. The natural response is to, I'm in trouble, is to view sin rightly. Remember when we were studying Isaiah chapter 6 last week? We saw this pattern, that first we have to view God rightly, and once we view God rightly, then we view sin rightly. It's a natural pattern. Remember in verse 1, Isaiah is describing what he saw, this throne room encounter. God gave him the privilege to kind of come in and see what was going on behind the scenes in the throne room of heaven. And as Isaiah is writing down the description of what's going on, he first gets a correct view of God. God is sitting on a throne. Who sits on thrones? Kings do, rulers do, right? And we learned that this throne is lifted up, that it's exalted, that even above the sinless angels is where God sits, that He is so far removed from us because He is holy, holy, holy. Remember that? And then we learned that His whole train, remember that, filled, not just ran up and down the aisle of the temple, filled the temple. Another sign of holiness and separation. And so Isaiah at first was encountered with a right view of God, but then did you notice what happens then in verse 5? He has a right view of sin. And it's only after he has a right view of God that he has a right view of sin. And he begins to say, whoa, I'm in trouble. I'm a man of unclean lips. I'm not worthy to be in His presence. Today, in order for us, I think, to understand about sin, we're going to go to a book of the Bible in the New Testament that speaks a lot about sin. There's a lot of weighty theology in talking about sin that Paul gives to us as he pens the letter to the Romans. And we're in Romans chapter 1, and we're going to start in verse 18. And I got to be honest with you, your sermon listening sheet has 4 points, right? Front page, back page. As I was fleshing this sermon out this week, it even happened on Friday, actually, after we'd already done the bulletin. I realized, man, this is going to be a long sermon if I did it all at once. I mean, I was at my normal length for the first 2 points, and so today all we're going to cover is the first 2 points of sin. And then next time we get together, which I've got to figure that one out, because do I want to talk about sin on Mother's Day? I might be in trouble, right? So we might revisit that in 2 weeks, okay? But we're going to come back to this, and we're going to finish this sermon out from Romans chapter 1. But today we're covering the first 2 points of sin, and we're going to start in Romans chapter 1, starting in verse 18. And it says this: For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. Verse 21. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools. All right, so within these verses, we're going to learn two truths about sin. If we're going to view it rightly, we've got to understand sin. And here's the first thing that we learn about sin. Sin is serious. Sin is serious business. Go back and look at verse 18. It says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven. So God's wrath is revealed. In what way? Against all who are ungodly and unrighteous, of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Does anybody here want to stand up and debate with me, or maybe argue against me when I tell you that God's wrath is serious? Anybody want to be like, no, it's not that big of a deal, really? Listen, when the God of the universe, who created everything that we see by speaking it into existence in 6 consecutive literal days, when his wrath is stirred up, that's a mighty, terrifying thing. And sin is what causes God's wrath to be stirred up. And so I want you to understand this morning, sin is serious. All sin is serious. As we talk about sin, though, I think we need to start here. We have to talk about the origin of sin. Because to understand how serious sin is, you've got to understand the origins of it, how it came into being, and what it actually did. And to understand the beginnings of sin, you have to go back to the book of the Bible that speaks to beginnings, and that is the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis literally means beginnings. And in Genesis chapter 3 is where we first encounter sin entering the world. Okay? And we've all heard about the first man and the first woman ever created, Adam and Eve. You remember them. They were placed in the Garden of Eden by God, and things were good until chapter 3. Because in Genesis chapter 3, we learn about how Adam and Eve's actions, their disobedience, brought sin into existence for our world. And as a result, there was some serious fallout. You remember the sin, don't you? God said, here's a tree. You can eat of any of the other trees you want in this garden, but don't eat of that tree. That tree is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Well, sure enough, they took some of its fruit and they ate it. And now there were some consequences, some serious consequences that happened. Death entered the world. Disease and sickness entered the world. Pain entered the world. That is the result of living in a world that has now been cursed with sin. Do you see that? Sin destroyed the world. Sin is serious. How serious are you about the sin in your life? And these first 2 points of this sermon may feel like, okay, this is pretty elementary, but we have to study it. It must be taught, because I feel as though some of us aren't really getting the picture, or some of us become too comfortable with sin in our lives. Well, I want to talk to you a little bit now about the extent of sin. We've talked about the origins of sin. I want to talk to you about the extent of sin. Who does sin affect? How long is the arm of sin? Here's a truth that the Bible makes perfectly clear time and time again, and you know it. Everyone is a sinner. Romans chapter 3 puts it this way in verse 23, all have sinned and fallen short of God's glory. Could that be any clearer? Well, what does all mean exactly? It means all, right? Everybody who has ever been born, who has taken a breath, or ever will be born, God has looked over the entire span of humanity because He knows everything. He knows how everything's going to play out. And He has said, He has summarized it this way, all have sinned and fall short of my expectations. That's how it is. That's how serious sin is. It affects every single person. Now, while it's true that Adam and Eve were the first to bring sin into the world, you have to keep in mind that the only reason they were the ones to first bring sin into the world was because they were the first humans to be created. If God would have said, okay, I'm going to start the world with Mark and Lindsay Nichols, and I'm going to put them in the Garden of Eden, guess who would have introduced sin to the world? Mark Nichols and Lindsay Nichols would have introduced sin to the world, okay? We don't somehow fool yourself into thinking, well, we just blame Adam and Eve for everything. We are all responsible to some extent to the sin in our lives. It originates with each of us. Our own choices, our own actions condemn us. We don't inherit anything from Adam, okay? You are guilty all on your own. And I think that's what we need to understand, is that everyone is a sinner. Now, there is one exception to that phrase. Those of you who've grown up in church know this. Who is the only person to ever walk, live, and breathe on this earth who never sinned? Is it the Pope? No. Who is it? Jesus the Christ. He is the only one who's never sinned. I hope you understand that. I hope you grasp that really well. Here's the second thing about the extent of sin. First, everyone is a sinner. Here's the second part. To claim otherwise is a lie. To claim otherwise and say, you know what, I do some things that aren't necessarily right, but it's not sin. And besides that, God, I'm going to do enough good things that when we come face to face in the future, you're going to look at all the good things I've done, and somehow that's going to erase and wipe out all the bad things I've done. That's a lie. You can't do that. 1 John chapter 1, verses 8 and 10 puts it really plainly as well. John writes, he says, hey, if we say we have no sin, we're deceiving ourselves, and the truth is not in us. And if we say that we have not sinned, then we make God a liar, and his word is not in us. So it's pretty serious business when we say that we don't have any sin. First of all, we ourselves are liars, but then of all, we're also calling God a liar. So let's not fool ourselves. Everybody's a sinner. And if you think somehow that exempts you, that you're not a sinner, you're calling God a liar. That's the extent, that's how far-reaching sin is. Well, here's where we're going to do some learning here today. Let's talk about the intent of sin. What are sin's intentions? I think sometimes we look at sin and we think, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, I'm imperfect. Yeah, I mess up, but I'm managing my sin. I've got it on the management program. What we fail to realize is that sin seeks to do 4 things in your life. In fact, it will do these 4 things in your life. First of all, sin will pursue you. Did you know that? It's persistent. Just because you were successful once to overcome sin, to overcome temptation, and say no, doesn't mean that it's going to leave you alone. That's not the end of it. Sin's persistent. It pursues you. In Genesis chapter 4, verse 7, we read about Adam and Eve's sons, 2 of them, named Cain and Abel. You guys know about Cain and Abel. They were brothers. They were both giving offerings to the Lord. And you remember how that all played out. Cain's offering was not accepted by God because it wasn't with a sincere attitude. It wasn't part of the first fruits of what he had. Abel's was accepted by God because he gave the first fatlings of his portion of his livestock. And after that takes place, Cain is really ticked off. He's really upset, and he's mad. But then God comes to him and has a little heart-to-heart with him. And this is what God tells Cain. He reminds him how serious sin is. Cain says, what's the matter with you? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door, and its desire is for you. But you must master it. You see, sin will pursue you. It's going to be waiting for you. It won't give up. It won't go away. You must continually fight it. And not only that, but the consequences of sin pursue you. Consequences follow you around, some of them the rest of your life. Let me just say some names that you're going to be familiar with. And then I want you to think about why you're familiar with these names, okay? Monica Lewinsky, Richard Nixon, O.J. Simpson. You see, those people will be forever associated with a sin that will follow them around even long after they're gone. Consequences pursue you. Perhaps some of you this morning have your own story of how the consequences of your sin have followed you around. And just when you thought you were done with the consequences, wham, right back in your face, you're dealing with them all over again. Sin will pursue you. Secondly, sin will disappoint you. Sin always disappoints. It always promises, but then it never delivers. It's never as good as it seems. It's never as sweet as it promises, because after the momentary delight of sin is gone, it always, without a doubt, never satisfies. Why do we forget that? Why are we so short-sighted in our minds, thinking, wow, I know I shouldn't do this, but man, it feels so good and it's fun? Why can't we see past the moment? If we could, I think we would run far away from it, understanding that sin disappoints. In the Hall of Faith chapter in Hebrews chapter 11, sin is described as fleeting or passing. And that's a perfect description of the pleasure of sin. It's like trying to grab a fistful of water. You think it'll be everything that you always wanted, but when you come up, you're empty. It will disappoint. Now, I know some of you guys have been staring at this bucket here for all service long. I want to talk a little bit about this. I was in Indianapolis taking a few days vacation, just kind of get away. And in downtown Indianapolis is a really cool store. I was walking downtown, came across a store I'd never heard of before. The name of the store is called Rocket Fizz. In the store in downtown Indianapolis in the store Rocket Fizz is just stocked. The shelves are just full of unique and weird sodas, pops. I was going through and I was trying to pick some that I you could spend thousands of dollars in there if you wanted to get every kind of soda. I was only going to get a 6-pack of soda, and you can mix and match. And of soda, I had to clarify that, right? So anyway, I had to mix and match. And one that caught my mind that I'd heard other people talk about is bacon soda. Not to be confused with baking soda, but bacon soda. Now, I brought these home. Lindsay, I shared these with Lindsay, just showed her the bottles, but we've not opened these. We've not had any of these. I don't know what it tastes like until today. And so in just a little bit, I'm going to ask two guys to come up here, and they're going to sample this one with me. And then I've got two other guys. And see, I had to get this one too, because you've heard the stories about growing up, how much I love peanut butter and jelly. Remember? I told you that. That's what I took to school every single day was peanut butter and jelly in my school lunch. And so they have a soda that's peanut butter and jelly flavored. And I thought, we got to try that one too. So here's what's going to happen. I'm going to ask my two people to come up, actually my four people to come up. We're going to have two try the peanut butter and jelly and then two try the bacon soda. And we're just going to get some reactions here, okay? So I thought, who better to ask to try bacon soda than some guys who are around hogs day in and day out? Some people who are like aficionado pork people. Dave Carroll, come on up. And Mike Carroll, come on up. Or Mike Carlisle, sorry, come on up. We're going to try some bacon-flavored soda today. And for peanut butter and jelly-flavored soda, I thought I'm going to ask the guy who was just so, when he was in the youth group, when Code Red was invented, Mountain Dew, he was like all over it. And so I'm going to ask Brandon Bliss if you would kind of come up. He's a soda pop connoisseur. Now, you got to come up on stage, guys. You guys are in the sermon. You're in the sermon. And I'm also going to ask Brigham Dione to kind of come up. You know, peanut butter and jelly is kind of associated with maybe a younger person's food, and we're going to have the boy charm of Brigham Dione come up here and try some of this too, guys. So I'm going to give you each a cup. I'm going to let you put some, they're cold, but if you want some ice, you can get your own ice. Stick it in there, Brig, give you that one. And I don't know, I brought a bottle opener. I don't know if these are twist off. Oh, yep, they are. So go ahead. And be sure you don't have to drink it all, but pour a cup full and then take it back to the people you're sitting with and have them sample some too. Wow, smell that. That's baking soda. That'll be good for the marketplace. Go ahead and pour yourself some. I'm going to smell this. What's this smell like? Oh, this one does smell good. I'm going to try some of this. All right. So I want you guys to try some of that. You know, I don't know what you're swish it around the mouth a little bit, get it in the palate. The aftertaste. The aftertaste is horrid. I'm tasting stale peanut butter is what I'm tasting. It's not, yeah, it's got a very sweet forefront taste, but then the aftertaste is horrible. It's more jelly than peanut butter. Yeah, it is. But it's like jelly and then peanut butter. Yeah. Okay. Let's try the bacon. Have you guys already tried the bacon? Okay, what are we thinking here with bacon? Does it taste like bacon? Okay, let me try this. This is worse than that. This is horrid. You don't think it's that bad? Okay, now I got to preface this. I've never eaten dog food, but if I was going to eat dog food, this is what I would assume it would taste like. That smoky flavoring is. Yeah, I've never eaten dog food. So surprise. You would stay with the real stuff, the genuine. You're not going to go into bacon flavored soda business anytime soon. You're going to stick with hogs, huh? What did you guys think of the bacon? If you pureed imitation bacon bits, yeah, exactly. And I like the bacon bits. Not delicious at all. So would we rather have genuine bacon or bacon flavored soda? Genuine bacon? Are you guys finished? No, you got to take that back and let your pew have that. What about the peanut butter and jelly? Would you rather have real peanut butter and jelly, or would you rather have it in a bottle? Real? Yeah, I think I would too. Guys, thank you guys very much. Thank you for your intellect, for your insight on that. We've got a little bit left over. First come, first serve after the service, okay? But this is the point I was making, and I didn't know how this was going to go. But the point I'm making with this is that sin promises that, man, it's bacon. It's going to be bacon. It's going to be delicious. We all like bacon. Just open it up and try it. But the problem is that it leaves a horrible taste in your mouth, and the after effects are awful. And sin always disappoints. It never lives up to the expectations that maybe you have with it. Here's the third thing sin will do. Sin will trip you up. Sin is like a spider web, and we are the fly. It's sticky and trapping. Now, here's the thing. Spider webs, if you've ever been out walking in the woods or hiking, and I've learned this over the years of hiking in the mountains of Colorado, you always take a walking stick. And the reason you take a walking stick is not to use it as a cane so much, but to kind of go before you and get rid of all the cobwebs that are stretched across the trail. Because the thing about spider webs is you don't see them coming, right? You're like, and then you do like the karate moves and the matrix moves. You're trying to walk into those, right? And but here's the thing with sin, you guys. I have yet to accidentally sin. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you just walk into it and you don't know, and all of a sudden you're in sin. What happens is, the way it's like a spider web is that you do it once and you think, oh, that wasn't so bad. That was kind of fun. I'll do it some more. And I'll do it some. And then pretty soon what happens is then you're trapped. It's not invisible. It's not like you just walk into it accidentally. You deliberately walk into sin. But the problem is it keeps us longer than we want to stay. And that's what I mean when it talks about tripping you up. And that leads us into this next part. The fourth thing that sin does, enslaves you. It enslaves you. You see, it pretends to be a friend. Sin pretends to be like a security blanket, a comforter, you know. Oh, having a bad day? Come to me, I'll make you feel better. But then in reality, when you do sin, you realize it's a master. It's a cruel master. This master wants to enslave you. It wants to embarrass you. It wants to ruin your family, destroy your integrity, hurt your friendships. That's what sin wants to do. Are you getting the picture? Sin is serious. Here's the second reality of sin that we learn from Romans chapter 1, and that is this. Sin is inexcusable. Going back to our text, I want to reread these verses. It reads, "For the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they know God, they do not honor him or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools." You see, there's no excuse that you can give that will pardon you from your sin. And that's because of this ultimate truth. And that is, I turn from the truth. It's my doing. I know what's right, I know what's true, but I turn my back on that and I walk and do what I want to do. In other words, what I'm saying is this: I am responsible for my own sin. People don't want to believe that. People have been giving excuses for their sin ever since sin entered the world. Remember Adam and Eve? It wasn't me, it was this woman. It was her fault. It wasn't me, it was the serpent. Everybody's been trying to pass the buck. But at the end of the day, you've got to realize you are responsible for your own sin. Here's some excuses I've heard people make concerning sin. Well, the devil made me do it. The devil made me do it. Listen, Satan makes you do nothing. He has no control over you. You have a free will. Just like God doesn't make you do anything, Satan doesn't make you do anything. You choose. Now, Satan is a great tempter, and he'll put things near you or in your path to say, doesn't this look good? But at the end of the day, it is you who are picking it up and doing it and participating in it. It's your responsibility. Here's another excuse I've heard some people make. Oh, I didn't know it was a sin. Baloney. Did you see what our text says? That God makes it evident to them. Everybody is born knowing the difference between what is right and what is wrong. And our society doesn't want to admit that, because then you have to admit that there's a creator that made you that way, to know the difference between what is right and what is wrong. It's called morals. Everybody is born knowing the difference between right and wrong. The problem is not everybody does what's right. And in Romans chapter 1, it makes it very evident that we know the truth because God has made it plain to us what is right and what is wrong. And furthermore, have you ever tried using that excuse with the police officer? Oh, I didn't know I was speeding, or I didn't know what the speed limit. How well did that work with the cop? You think that's going to work very well with God? Here's the third, and this is the most prevalent in our culture, in our society right now. And I'm jumping up and down on this point because it's a cultural issue we have got to have answers for. And the Bible does have answers for it. Here's the third excuse people say. Well, I was born that way. Or God made me this way. I'm telling you guys, if you've bought into that lie, that's exactly what it is a lie. We're told, going back to Genesis chapter 1, God creates man and female in his image. His holiness. And so there are things that are out there that people want to diagnose as a disease. Well, this is just something that I was born with, or this is how it is. I'm telling you, you may be tempted in other areas that other people aren't, but that doesn't mean that you were born that way. You're born in the image of God. And so excuses are not going to fly with God. Okay? You have to know that I'm responsible at the end of the day for my own actions, my own thoughts, my own words. Perhaps in the phrase, I turned from the truth, where I had you underline truth in your bulletins, maybe I probably should have had you underline the word I. Because you and I are really good at pointing the finger of sin in others. We're really good at seeing sin in the government, or seeing sin on the news, or in my neighborhood, or with my spouse, or with my kids, or with my coworkers, or with my church leaders. We're really good about pointing out the faults of others. But the problem is that we need to recognize that it's me. I'm responsible for my own sin. You see, revival is not about turning a country or even turning a church back to God. It's about turning your heart back to God. And it only happens when you understand this brutal truth. I am responsible for the sin in my own life. I am responsible. And finally, sin is inexcusable because my Creator convicts me. I can't plead. You see, there's going to come a day when every single person will stand before God in judgment. And let me share with you two different passages of Scripture that reiterate this point. In Romans chapter 4, verse 12, it reads, "So then each one of us will give an account of himself to God." And in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10, it reads, "For we all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may be recompensed for his deeds in the body, according to what he has done, whether good or bad." See, there's going to come a day when each person, every single one of us, will stand before our Creator. How do you feel about that? Because here's a newsflash. God knows absolutely everything. You won't be able to talk your way out of the actions that you committed. He knows the motives behind what you did. He knows the thoughts behind everything that you've done, everything that you've said. And because God knows everything on that day of judgment, He will rule justly. He won't make a mistake. His verdict will be 100% right 100% of the time. How does that make you feel? Because I've talked with a lot of followers of Jesus Christ. I've talked with a lot of Christians who are a little bit nervous about Judgment Day. And I want to let you know that if you're a follower of Jesus Christ and you're living your life for Him, you've got no reason to worry about Judgment Day. You have no reason to dread it. Why is that? Is that because you're such a good person? Absolutely not. For those who follow Jesus and who have accepted Him as our Lord and Savior, His blood takes care of our sin. God doesn't see your sin. He sees the righteousness of His Son instead in your life. But it's really important that you make that decision to accept Him in this life, that you make sure that before you go to the judgment seat, that you have His blood in your life, covering and cleansing you of all the unrighteousness that is there. I want to simply end with a video this morning, and it's a video that really is a quick video. You may have seen it before, but it does such a fantastic job of summing up everything that we've talked about here this morning. It's only a 50-second clip, and just watch this, and then we'll wrap up with our time decision here this morning.
If we say we have no sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. Jesus Christ, the righteous one, is the atoning sacrifice for our sins. God placed on him the sin of us all. So that he could justify the sins of the whole world.
That video, what a great visual reminder of what Jesus Christ has done for every single one of us. But did you notice that bottle was clear to begin with, and then sin entered in? And each of us have fallen short. We all stumble and fall in many ways, but the end result is always the same. It makes us dirty. It makes us impure. It makes us sinful. And the only way to get rid of that sin, is to accept Jesus Christ into your life and receive him as your Lord and Savior and allow him, his work, to remove the impurities that are in your life and in your heart. We're going to have our time decision here this morning, and the decision is just for that if you would like to come this morning, you've never accepted Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior, and you're not so sure about what would happen at Judgment Day, this time is for you.